Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us this week. If you're finding us for the first time, please follow us and subscribe, like, do everything that people do on social media. We hope that you're going to love our conversation today. I am chatting to Rebecca. Rebecca will introduce herself because people on this platform introduce themselves. They do a better job than I do. How are you, Rebecca? Nice to have you.
I'm fine, thanks. How are you, Mpumi?
I'm great, thanks. Please introduce yourself.
Sure. First of all, thank you so much for having me on your podcast. I'm really excited about this conversation and to be with your listeners. So, as Mpumi has mentioned, my name is Rebecca Muriuki. I am a leadership coach and I help Black women who want to land leadership roles and really get recognized and paid for their value at work. I am a mom as well. Mom first always. I am a mom of 3, including twins, and I work at the largest global audit firm as an associate director. So I really am passionate about helping other women achieve the same and even more success than I have.
Great. That sounds amazing. So I can relate. I'm also a mother of 3. And I tell a story that at least you had twins, so you had 2 pregnancies. So I had 3 pregnancies, and with my third, people will ask me, "Oh, is this your first child?" And I'll go, "It's my 3rd child," and they'll roll their eyes at me like, "How can you be having 3 kids?"
Like it's not allowed.
Like, no, how can this be your 3rd child?
Yeah, I get that a lot as well. A lot of, staring faces like in this day and age, really?
People judge. I was like,
Yeah.
it was weird. And somebody then who had 3 kids then will have a conversation with you about, oh, I also
Uh-huh.
have 3 kids, and then you engage. But other people will literally roll their eyes on you. Anyway.
Yeah. You're not alone in this.
Yeah, I know, which I think was weird. But anyway, people do these things. So Rebecca, thanks for joining us today. The topic, guys, that we're going to be looking at is talking about imposter syndrome. And when I was chatting to Rebecca about this, I was like, I can't believe somebody out there has given this a name, and it's a syndrome. And now,
Yeah.
like, there's something major we need to do about this. But that said, I think it's something that a lot of us face in different spaces and mainly in the workplace. So Rebecca, just define for us what imposter syndrome is, and maybe talk to us as well about your own career journey, and then we can dig deeper into what imposter syndrome is all about.
Yeah, that's a really good point for me. And I think when we were talking about this, I shared with you how I had not heard about the word imposter syndrome until probably 2, 3 years ago. I didn't know that there was a name for self-doubt. So it's very interesting how trends come and go in the corporate space, and it's definitely a buzzword right now, especially with this move to elevate more women into leadership positions. And so, of course, there's a formal textbook or dictionary definition, and how the Oxford Dictionary defines imposter syndrome is it's a psychological occurrence in which an individual doubts their skills, talents, or accomplishments, and has a persistent, so it just keeps going, a persistent internalized fear of being exposed as a fraud. But how I like to simplify it is, for me, there's 2 phrases. So every time I hear my clients or I hear someone say, I am not something enough, or when they say, who am I to do XYZ, I know that that's imposter syndrome. And so that's a really easy way of checking if you're experiencing that imposter syndrome. But really what underlies it is, and I like the dictionary definition, is it's a psychological occurrence. So it's not based on facts, it's just based on thoughts that have grown and become really persistent internalized fears.
Oh, okay. And I think, as you say, the self-doubt becomes the biggest thing, and it's more internalized more than anything. And it's not like, do you think there's always evidence that you have around it, or is it just really something that is more mental than anything?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So most of the time you build up this evidence in your mind based on past experiences, based on very unrealistic expectations of yourself, and then you make those factual. And that's why you really need to look at what's happening in your mind and how these facts are actually not facts. And there's a really good exercise I like giving my clients where we actually go through each belief and we break it down. I ask them, where did this belief come from? When did it start? What happens? What triggers it? And then at the end of that exercise, they realize that this is just a belief I've created and it's not based on any factual information. And that's a good thing about imposter syndrome. You can change it because it's really just based on your thoughts and your feelings, and most of the time, not on any factual observations.
Yeah, and I like that method because it usually helps a lot with even just just limiting beliefs of some sort. Because what I see a lot as well is we pick up beliefs from other people, whether it's our parents, whether it's our friends, whether it's just society at large, and then we make them ours. Up
Mm-hmm.
until somebody really questions you around that belief and questions how truthful it is, it becomes that aha moment of, now that you're saying it, it's actually not true, right?
Exactly. And I feel like you just took the words out of my mouth, because when people try to understand this, I always explain that it shows up, it could be showing up because of your upbringing, literally how you were brought up, who you were surrounded by. Those beliefs that they had just, were passed down onto you, and you've never really questioned them. You've never really assessed whether they're working in your favor, whether they're serving you or not. And also societal and career norms also play a role in whether you experience imposter syndrome.
Okay. No, and I think that makes sense. So Rebecca, I fully agree with you because some of the things really are about society, and we end up taking all those things out there and we make them our own. But let's get a bit deeper. How does this show up in the workplace? Have you experienced it yourself, or the clients that you deal with? How have they explained it to be showing up in the workplace?
Oh yeah, it shows up in different forms. And I think there's this misconception that when you get a promotion, suddenly you'll stop feeling that imposter syndrome. But it just shows up in a different form, usually, new level, new devil. And some of the common examples I hear is, oh, I just need to do a bit more research, then I'll feel more confident to speak up in meetings about this topic. Another very, very common example is feeling that you have to do it yourself in order for it to count. And that is actually working against you in the long run, because leaders actually work through other people, and they
Mm,
empower other people to get work done. Another
mm,
very common example is working hard and feeling guilty when you say no to work, when you say no to, your team leader or a new opportunity, because you just want to be the superwoman and you just want to keep validating yourself and others that you belong in that position, or that you belong, in the room with the seat at the table. And that plagues women a lot, and can cause a lot of, repercussions, especially if you're a mom, because then you're feeling guilt on the work side, and then you're also feeling guilty on this personal family side, because you're just dedicating all your time to work that you don't even have energy and bandwidth to be present when it comes to your family.
Yeah, and I can relate to that one. And you end up parenting from a guilt space.
Yes.
And how that shows up is you either then be buying a lot, there's gifts and this, because you're thinking that will make up for the fact that you're either working too hard or you're never there, and it becomes a whole lot of other things. But if you're dealing with somebody who's battling to show up mainly in meetings, because I hear that a lot, where somebody has been given, maybe they've gotten the promotion, but now they are not feeling that they can take their space within mainly meetings. So how would you work with a client who shows up that way?
Yeah, so there's a very common quote around imposter syndrome that says, the only way to stop feeling like an imposter is to stop thinking like one. And so the thinking is what we really need to dig deep into and really assess what triggers those feelings that, oh, maybe this point I want to share is not going to be taken well, or, oh, I'm not as smart as the other people in this room. And when you start to assess the triggers of that feeling, you can then address the thoughts that, trigger it in the first place. And, it's going back to what we talked about earlier on limiting beliefs. But then beyond that, you then need to take action, because action is actually how you overcome imposter syndrome. There is no other way. And sometimes it's going to be messy. Sometimes it's going to be imperfect, right? Sometimes you are going to say something in a meeting and then people will think it's not a great idea, right? Then you need to do the post self-reflection and make sure that you're self-coaching yourself and reminding yourself that you're still worthy, right? You still have a place, you still have value to give, and just continue to take that action until you get better and better and better, and until that self-critic, that voice diminishes and diminishes and diminishes. But you have to take action. We can't just stop at doing the mindset work. You have to put that mindset and that belief into action.
Yeah. So there's an action that comes with it. It's not a once-off thing.
Yes. And every time you get a promotion or you get a pay raise, you realize that it will come back, almost like you're trying to self-validate why you deserved that promotion. And so it will come back, and then you'll have to do the work again, just reprogramming your mind, building that belief that you're worthy, building that belief that you don't have to know everything to say something in a meeting, right? And that work just never ends, especially if you're in a phase in your career where you're progressing and advancing fast through the ranks of the corporate space you're in.
Yo, but Rebecca, that seems tiring.
It does. I never said it was easy.
No, you didn't. But it seems so tiring. Like
yes, but the satisfaction you get when you actually do take the action and when you build that self-worth is just so worth it. And the more you do it, the less, it becomes work. It almost becomes on autopilot. So it almost becomes something you just start doing. You're not even thinking about it. Right. But you have to take that action, So I always tell people, especially when it comes to meetings, maybe for you, for the next month, you're going to just facilitate the meetings. That's going to be your role, right? Put up your hand that you're going to facilitate the team meetings. And then after that, you're going to challenge yourself to share at least one idea in a meeting or to ask a question, and
Mm.
you just keep building on it. It's almost like a muscle that you're flexing. At
Yeah.
some point, you're going to pick up that 5 kg weight and it's going to feel like nothing, right? But you
Mm.
have to do that work of practicing, and putting that muscle into action for it to start becoming natural and, on autopilot.
Okay. No, and I get that, and it's something that I think I always think about with people who are saying I don't have confidence, right? Because sometimes confidence comes with you doing and practicing and showing up and doing, and the more you sit in the corner and you keep saying, but I'm not confident, and not trying, then nothing happens.
Yes, yes. And I think a lot of us as women just put that unnecessary pressure on ourselves. Like we want to go from level 1 to level 10 in one day. And then
Yeah.
that stops us from taking action. But for you, you just need to work on going to level 2, right? Like I said,
Yeah.
you just need to work on asking a question in a meeting. And then once
Mm.
you've built that confidence, then the next step is getting out of the comfort zone and working on sharing an idea. And then
Yeah.
you build up, and then eventually you'll be speaking on stages. You'll be putting yourself out there for huge, high impact, high visibility projects. But it
Yeah.
doesn't start there. It starts with these small actions that you build consistently every
Mm.
single day or every single week in your work, and taking on those opportunities and then building the confidence from there.
Yeah. No, I get that, and that makes sense to me. I hope anybody who's listening really, and it is about the first step. How do I just take the first step? And realizing that when you do take the first step, the sun will still shine the following day, you will be alive, and everything will be okay. But sometimes we get held back by that fear, and that can
Yes.
hold us back quite badly.
Yes. And a good question I love giving my clients to ask themselves is, what's the best that could happen? Instead of asking
Mm.
yourself, what's the worst, and preparing for all the worst case scenarios, prepare for the best. That
Yeah.
literally is going to shift your mindset towards making the most of these opportunities. And once it's done, you'll be like, wow, I can't believe I did that. Let's go on to the next thing. But you
Yeah.
have to be brave and take that step, to take that action for you to experience that result and build the confidence.
Yeah, I like the thinking, and I think another thing to add to that question is, who would you be if you did open your mouth? Who would you be if you did share your thought? Because that then takes you to the next level, that I will be somebody that people will want to hear from. I will be, I don't know, be seen as a subject matter expert or whatever the case is. But for you
Mhm.
just to consciously think, who would I be if I was able to do that particular thing?
Absolutely, absolutely. That's so powerful. The being is so much more important than the doing.
Mm,
So I
yeah,
think that's a really good point you've raised for me.
no, that's great. So and I like what you were saying earlier when you were saying you work with Black women. And you don't have to be scientific about what I'm going to ask you. Are you finding that Black women are experiencing the imposter syndrome more than anybody else? Like, what is your experience?
Absolutely, yes. And that's why I'm so passionate about it. And I know that one of the biggest reasons has got to do with our upbringing, right? Many
Mm.
of us come from backgrounds where our parents only dreamed of being in the corporate roles that we're in. Some of our families were the only ones who have actually stepped into a corporate office, you know
Mm.
and so that plays a big role, and factor in how we show up at work, because we didn't have people to emulate, right? We didn't have people to look up to kind of gauge, what are the unwritten rules of the corporate game.
Yeah.
And so it already puts you sort of at a disadvantage in comparison to other people who maybe had those role models, those unsolicited role models that they were able to look up to. And even other small but significant ways in which we were brought up has an impact in how we show up at work. So, for example, I always like giving this example of how when I was growing up, I was always told you do not answer back to your elders, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Children are meant to be seen and not heard. You do not speak back. If someone older tells you to do something, you do it. You do not ask questions.
Yeah.
And those beliefs were ingrained in me. And when I got to the workplace, I was so scared of speaking in a meeting where my boss was there. I thought that it was wrong to share an idea or an opinion that differed to someone else in the room because I thought it would be disrespectful. And so for me, that's why it's so important to empower Black women and to just help them realize some of the things that they learned from their upbringing and from the environments they were in by default that are not serving them when they get into the corporate space.
Wow. And I think that is that is a powerful example that you've just shared. I think at some point I need to bring a group of women and we just break it down, the things that we were taught when we were growing up, which we have had to unlearn so as to be successful in the workplace, because there's a lot of those.
Oh, yes. Yes, that is just the tip of the iceberg.
No, in fact, that's an idea. I must have a panel of a few women where we can have this conversation, because I think it's powerful and it holds a lot of people back, mainly our generation. And I think the younger generation are pushing boundaries a bit, which what would be called boundaries, but for them it's not boundaries. For them it's like I'm speaking my mind. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I would love to listen into that conversation, to be honest.
No, you'll be part of that conversation. So no, I think it's a conversation that we really need to have, because it holds us back, and then we doubt ourselves, and then we end up being given names about this imposter syndrome that we're experiencing, and the bulk of it comes from the way we were brought up.
Absolutely.
Okay, so how do we take this forward? How do we just get somebody? I'm going to sound drastic. How do we get somebody just to stop it? You know, when somebody just says stop it, like that, believe in yourself.
I wish it were just as simple as saying, yes, I'll stop it, and then it just disappears.
No, I know, because you said it's something that you keep doing it. But are there any tips that maybe also you can share just for somebody to constantly regulate themselves, if you want to call it that, or reflect on, you know what I've just done? I've actually just doubted myself, and I need to then regulate and reframe, if you want. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So the two things I would say is, first of all, you need to become a guard to the door of your mind. So you have to become so self-aware of the thoughts that you allow into your mind and the thoughts that you're entertaining, because that's the root of everything, right? And then once you do that, then start to be aware of the triggers. What thoughts trigger this? What feelings trigger this? Or what situations trigger it? Is it that when you go into a meeting and you're the most junior person, that triggers the imposter syndrome? Then we need to work on how are you going to show up, right? What strengths are you going to leverage in that situation to overcome that feeling that you're not smart enough or you're not as smart as the other people, right? And when you can then understand those triggers and then think of what strengths you're going to bring across so that you can stand out in an impactful way, that becomes so much more easier than always trying to use willpower to say, and willpower, can work, but it's very tiring and exhausting. Instead, I want you to step into your strength, step into your power, and think of how you can use your power in those situations to counteract that imposter syndrome. But then you have to take action. You can't just be in that meeting thinking about it. And there'll always be these sort of, I call them like little gems of messages from the universe. There'll be like these silent moments in a meeting, and there'll be something telling you, okay, say this. This is your chance to speak, right? Don't ignore those opportunities. That's your opportunity to shine, right? Make use of those opportunities, even in the smallest way possible, right? You are going to start to build that confidence and start to diminish the impact of that self-critic. But when you keep ignoring those gems that the universe sends to you, it's almost like you're validating that imposter syndrome. Because what happens at the end of the meeting? You'll be beating yourself up. You'll be saying, see, I knew you weren't smart enough. You didn't say anything, right? So how you counteract that self-critic is by taking that action and just being very aware of when those opportunities come. So I know I said two things, but for me, those would be the top 3 action steps that you can take to stop it, like you said.
Sometimes I get harsh. I just go like, this just needs to stop.
Sometimes you need to be.
Yeah, and I know it's not, it's some of those things are not easy. But I think once I tell myself it just needs to stop, there's an energy that comes with, okay, I need to figure out how to then work through it, because I know that it's blocking me or it's hindering me or it's challenging me. And that for me, that's where it comes from. But sometimes I say it in, and there was a time I think when I said it to my kids, and they were just like, no, you can't be telling us just to stop it. You know?
See, kids of these days. In our days, you could not ever say no.
I know. But it helps, because then you
It
take a
does.
step back and you realize that it's not as easy as you're saying it. But I think for me, even in my head, it's all just about, okay, this encourages me to take a step towards fixing or reflecting as well. Like, why is it bothering me this much? Right. And I like what you're saying, that those moments where there's a thing that says you must say something, say it. Because there's nothing as bad as going home and you kick yourself and you're like, if only I did, but you've missed the opportunity. I think that is
Absolutely.
always, it's just always the thing of if only. And now whether the opportunity will come again or not
Yeah.
become,
Yeah.
yeah.
You would
In
rather
fact,
go home saying, oh, I did this, I could do this better, than regretting you didn't do anything at all.
exactly. Exactly. I was running a workshop the other day on personal branding, and one of the people in the room shared that they met their CEO in the bathroom, and they had never met her, and so the CEO greeted her. They were the same, and she says, I greeted back. And you could see that the CEO kind of wanted more from me. And she says, I was just tongue-tied. I didn't know what to do or what to say. And even to this day, she regrets that moment, because I was teaching them about doing an elevator pitch. And I'm like, you meet your CEO. So how are you going to introduce yourself? And she's like, Mpume, now that you've taught me this, I want to corner her somewhere and go, hi, this is me, and this is what I do. Because the self-doubt kick in, she kind of just didn't know what was going on. And to this day, she wants that moment to repeat itself, so that now she can confidently say, this is who I am and this is how I contribute to this business. But the opportunity hasn't arisen. So
Yeah. Missed
yeah,
opportunity.
missed opportunity. It's really a missed opportunity. But I always say, you never know. now if it does come, at least you'll be prepared.
Yes,
Yeah, you
absolutely.
will be prepared. Yeah. Rebecca, thanks for this. I think it's a topic that I should have covered a long time ago. But I think I was always just getting stuck in the fact that, oh my God, it's been labeled, it's been given a name, you know. But I think the way you've broken it down for anybody who's listening, you've made it real for people. And I think even the steps that you've shared, you've made it real and tangible. And I really hope, I always say for these conversations, even if one person takes something out of it, I'm happy, and we've done good work for the day.
Absolutely. Yes. And the conversation continues, right? Next year it's maybe going to be labeled something else. As long as you have the tools to know
Yeah,
how to deal with it, you're good to go. So
yeah,
don't fear the name. Everyone experiences it, right? There's nothing wrong with you if you're experiencing it. Everyone does at some point.
yeah.
You just get better at managing it if you're intentional about your actions.
Yeah, I like that. I really like that. So, where do people find you on social media?
Yes. So I am predominantly on LinkedIn. You can find me at Rebecca Muriuki. I also hang out on Instagram, on the Instagram story specifically at Rebecca K Muriuki. So connect with me there, send me a DM. I would love to have a chat with you around, imposter syndrome, what your experience has been, what you've learned from this. And if you have any questions, feel free to shout out.
Okay, no, thank you very much. Are there any? I think you've kind of shared the three things which were more tips, but just from our overall conversation, what are the three things that you'd like somebody to take out of this?
Wow, that's a very, very good question for me. I would like to say, first of all, there's nothing wrong with you if you're experiencing imposter syndrome. Second of all, you need to work on those limiting beliefs. You really need to be intentional about it. And then, third of all, action, action, action. Action is what is going to trump imposter syndrome in your career.
Thank you for that. So, for anybody who is listening to us today, yeah, I think Rebecca has really shared some gems there. Please take something out of it. Feel free to share, follow us, and comment. We really love to hear your comments, and rate us whichever way you feel, and hope that we've made a difference in somebody's life today. And we'll see you guys in our next episode. Thank you very much.